Hi, my name's Molly Lichtenheld, and I'm a junior at Glenbard South High School. There was a time in my life where I struggled with anxiety and finding my voice. I cared so much about being accepted that I would stay quiet even when something hurt me. I would overthink everything I said, I would replay the conversations in my head, and convince myself that speaking up would only make things worse. It felt easier to say nothing than risk messing something up. I also didn't really understand how to love people who hurt me. I thought forgiving meant to just ignore it and act like it didn't happen, and that made me feel weak. But because of Jesus, I've started to see things differently. I know that my voice matters, and He actually wants to hear me. I don't have to change who I am because I'm accepted through Him. When my anxiety gets loud, I try and bring it to Him instead of letting it control my thoughts. I'm also learning that loving people who hurt me doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means choosing grace, but also knowing that my worth is standing firm in who God says I am. That part hasn't been easy, but it's really important. But I've grown a lot, and I'm not as silent as I used to be, and definitely not as afraid. Jesus reminds me that I'm heard and chosen, and that's what keeps me going. Our passage today is from Philippians 2:14 through 16. Do everything without grumbling and arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like the stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ, and I did not run or labor in vain. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Molly is just finishing her junior year at Glenbard South, and I met her for the first time when she was a freshman. And Molly is the kindest soul you'd ever meet. She is just always looking out for people, bringing people into the fold. She's a really great person. Thanks for sharing, Molly. My name is Carter. I serve as the high school pastor here at Glen Ellen Bible Church, and maybe you've noticed some students walking around with red shirts this morning. That's because this is our first week of 2 weeks of our fundraiser for our youth ministry trips this summer. We're going to North Carolina and DR, partnering with both Experience Missions and Go Ministries. Those are two ministry organizations that are on the ground all year round, and we're going with them and partnering with them as they work with people who are in need of help. We'll be doing work projects. We'll be doing work with kids, helping the elderly with their homes, and also helping athletes in DR, as that's something Go Ministry does as well. So if you're somebody and you're interested in hearing more about the trip, all those students in those red shirts are there because they want to talk about their trip and share what they're doing and why they're going. I'd highly encourage you to stop by that table or stop a student in a red shirt and ask them, where are you going? What are you doing? And if you're able to support as well, that'd be great as well. Let me just take a second to pray, as I need it, and we all need it. Father in heaven, we come before you, and as we open up your word this morning, we just are thankful that we have it, and we're thankful that your word is here to guide us through life and give us hope. And Lord, I just pray that as we open your word this morning, that you would just speak to us clearly. In your son's name, amen. We are in the book of Philippians right now as a church. This is a small letter near the back of our Bibles. And as we've been going through it, we've been focusing on this theme of hope. And we're not shoehorning this theme in just because. Hope is actually the encouragement of Paul's letter to the people living in Philippi. And this morning, hope is the encouragement I would love for each of you to have, know, and feel as you walk out of the building this morning. That being said, as Molly was reading, there's something in this verse that stood out to me and that caught my attention, and maybe it stood out to you, especially if Paul is encouraging. He uses two words. He calls the generation these people were living in warped and crooked. Warped and crooked. And when I read that, I thought, those two words describe our world today pretty well. Don't get me wrong, there are great things about our generation that I love, things that make life fun, interesting, meaningful, purposeful, but eventually, good things just seem to veer off and just go sideways. For example, as a Canadian living here in the States, how do we lose both gold medals to you guys in hockey? That's our thing. It's good when it's our thing, but life just goes crooked sometimes. But don't those two words just like describe our generation well? We've all experienced this world's crookedness and warpedness in one way or another. Good things in our lives just tend to veer off and become warped and crooked in different ways, making us feel as if there's nothing purely good in this world, leaving us to think that this world has no hope. I have a dentist that I've been going to for a little over 4 years now. His office is in Chicago, but I still drive in twice a year for cleanings. And one thing I picked up pretty quickly after meeting him is that he and his wife love to travel. So much so that every time I sit in the chair, I ask him, "So where'd you go this year?" And without fail, he tells me about a big trip he's just gotten back from. And I love asking him this question because he's not a timeshare guy. He's not a all-inclusive guy in Cancun. He's like, his type of trip is taking like a safari ride in South Africa, just him, his wife, and a guide, all by themselves for a week. That's the kind of trips he goes on every single time. It's just an amazing trip. And so one time I was sitting in the chair and I asked him, "Where'd you come from? Where have you been?" And he was telling me about this trip that he had just gone to Antarctica. And it wasn't a cruise. It was actually this like other type of boat that allows you to get to places where cruise boats can't. And they would go and they would hike and they would be in places where people have never been before. And while I was sitting there and getting my teeth cleaned, he started describing everything he saw in Antarctica. He started talking about the beauty, believe it or not, the colors, the uniqueness of this land that he had just never seen before. And naturally, because he was cleaning my teeth, I was looking straight up and trying awkwardly not to look in his eyes. But as he was telling me and describing what he saw, I could just tell that his eyes are swelling up a little bit, like as if he was just tearing up. I was just talking about the beauty. And so I'm someone who, if I have a question, I have a hard time not asking it. And so I asked him, I was like, every time I'm here, you're coming back from a trip like this. What is it that you love so much about traveling? And he just said, "Traveling gives me joy, man. I see things I never knew existed, and it reminds me of how small I really am." But then he added this. He said, "This world is so hard, and I just don't see a better way of coping with it other than traveling. It just gives me peace." And I sat there for a second and nodded along, and he'd been my dentist for 4 years, and I like to ask questions and talk about things, and we've talked about different things going on in the world, and he's even told me about little like things that he's going through personally. So I had an idea about what he was referring to, and so I said to him, "All right, traveling gives you peace. What gives you hope?" And he stopped what he was doing for a second and looked kind of puzzled and said, "Hope? What do you mean by hope?" With not a lot of elegance, I said something along the lines of, the thing in life that keeps you going. What is that for you? And he paused for a second and said, "This world is so dark and broken, I don't think there's much hope for it. That's probably why I travel so much. You might as well enjoy each day to the fullest." Church, this is what I want to get at this morning. Because what my dentist said to me that day is something I think a lot of us believe about our world and our generation. And I want to push back against that belief because I don't think it's true. As Christians, we do have hope because we know that Jesus is coming back. Someday, all things will be made new. But what about today? Today still matters. We've got to know it. What about hope for today? Like the things that we're struggling with. There are realities we face in life that are so hard to go through, that don't make sense to us, and are most likely when it comes to just losses in life that we somehow have to come to terms with. But there are truths in our passage today that stop me from believing that there's no hope for us today. Hope in how we live, hope in the struggles we face every single day, the sins, hope with the sins we're controlled by, and even the different tragedies that take place all over the world. And as we go through this passage today, it's my prayer that you see there is hope for today. It's not just at the end. There's hope today. So let's look at our text together. Again, in Philippians 2, verses 14 through 16. Paul writes to the Philippians, saying, "Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation." Maybe you're like me, and when you read this verse, all you see is something you can't do. I thought Paul was writing to encourage us in Philippians, not put more pressure on. Who can do everything in life without grumbling and arguing? That's impossible. Who can become blameless and pure? Nobody. Who can be completely without fault in the world we live in? And it's natural for us as human beings to see the glass half full rather than half empty rather than half full. And if you've ever taken a personality test, after you get your results, you glance at what you did, who you are and what you're good at, and then you always go to see what you aren't and what you're not good at. That's what we do in life, and that's what we do with this verse too. We see Paul telling these people to stop grumbling and stop arguing in everything they do so they become blameless and pure and without fault, adding pressure, completely missing the fact that Paul called them children of God in the moment. He says, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Paul's writing to people who've already heard and believed the gospel message. Pastor Kelly walked us through this event last week. And so the reason Paul is challenging them to live this way is because they already are children of God. They already are part of his family. And it's significant to be part of God's family. It's significant to be a child of God. Because if I went to one of your guys' homes this afternoon, I'd walk in the door and I'd say, shoes on or off. I'd go, where do you want me to sit? But if I walked into my parents' place, my shoes get kicked off at the door and I just open the fridge. Because it's different when you're a kid of the family. And it's different for us when we are children of God. When you're just somebody who doesn't believe in God and is not part of the family, that's a different thing. But God welcomes us into his family, and he adopts us into his family, and we get to be part of his family with all the blessings that come with that. Our abilities or inabilities to do everything without grumbling or arguing isn't the condition that decides who we are in life. Rather, it's the calling. It's the calling that we have to live out because of who our Father is. If our Father is this way, we want to be like him. We want to grow to be like him. And so it's not to don't grumble and don't argue ever. It's like, God is this way. He's blameless and pure. He's without fault, even in this crooked generation. Be like him. Paul is encouraging them. And he's encouraging them by reminding them of who they are in Christ. Someone I've seen do this really well is the chaplain at Wheaton College, Chaplain Wilson. If you're ever at Lower Beams, and that's one of the main places on campus, and you'll hear him walking around the halls, and he'll just be like, "Good morning, daughter of the King. How are you, son of God?" All the time. And I love it because he's just encouraging, he's reminding these students who are going through it that you're a child of God where you are, no matter what you did last night, no matter what you're thinking right now, no matter where you wish you were, you're a child of God right now. And he just reminds them, and that's what Paul is doing in this verse. It's not this verse where he's just hitting on them, going, you got to stop arguing. You got to stop grumbling. You've got to be pure. You got to become this. He's saying, you're children of God. Live into it. And that's why Paul is challenging them to do everything without grumbling or arguing so they become pure and blameless children of God over time. Paul is challenging them to live a certain way. But can you see why the challenge is made? It's because of who they are and where they are. They're children of God, and they're living in, unfortunately, a warped and crooked generation. The best way I've come up to describe a little bit more of what I mean is that I joined a gym here in Glen Ellen called F45. It's kind of like a high-intensity workout class, which means you don't get a lot of breaks. So naturally, there are times when I'm working out and I get tired and I just feel like stopping. I just want to take a rest. But what happens when I do that is there are people there, coaches, who challenge us to keep going, encourage us to try and push through even when it's hard. The challenge isn't always encouraging in the moment. It's not always what I want in the moment, but it's often what helps me keep going. It's often what I need to improve. And in the same way, sometimes we need people encouraging us to keep going in our walks with God, because it can help us see where we're at and also see where we need to grow. And that's what Paul's doing here in our message, in our passage. He's encouraging his people to live into who they are by challenging them to keep going, to do everything without arguing or grumbling, to become pure and blameless, without fault, children of God in a warped and crooked generation. But let me just say, there are times in the gym when I'm being challenged, and I'm being encouraged, and I'm being yelled at to keep going, and I can't. I stop. Believe it or not, I got limits. But when that happens, my coaches don't think less of me because of it. They're usually high-fiving me. They're like, way to go. Keep going. Because they're there for the process. This is obvious for us, and it makes sense when it comes to things in the gym, but it's not as obvious to us in our spiritual lives. When we hit our limits in the gym, we still feel a sense of accomplishment afterwards, and we keep trying, hoping to get better, because someday we know we will. But when we hit our limits in our spiritual lives, we get discouraged with ourselves and feel like God's just disappointed with us. You're a child of God. That means God's your father. He's there for the long haul. Like any good parent, no matter what your kid does, you love them. And God is a better parent than you will ever be. So, me too. And he loves us and cares for us and walks through life with us. He's there for the long haul. This is the good news of the gospel. This is what's good about becoming a child of God and putting our faith in Jesus Christ, is because all the weight, all the pressure goes off our shoulders of what we can do to be like him. And rather, it's just following somebody who already is blameless and already is pure. And this is Paul's encouragement, that God's making people blameless and pure over time. So that he's changing us, that he's encouraging us, that he's transforming us over time. So keep going. Keep living, keep following him, and he's going to change you. He's going to mold you, and he's going to shape you over time. And you know what I love about this truth? It's that it's a reminder that God's doing something. You know, sometimes I feel like I forget that. I think sometimes we forget that God has just saved us in the past, and now he's going to come back someday, and then we'll be in heaven. And until then, we're just kind of like hanging on, trying to live as righteous as we possibly can, and realizing that we're failing and hope we don't fail too much. But God's doing something right now. He's transforming his people. He is walking with them and encouraging them and shaping them into people that are more like him each and every day. And we can see that in our lives. And yeah, it's just awesome to see that how Paul shows them what he's doing. And at the end of what he was saying, he gives us a reason for why. He says, become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation, because then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. The Philippians would shine like stars among them. That is, the people around them living in the warped and crooked world with them. Their growth, God changing them, would be like a star in the sky, where every night you just see it. It's like, yeah, I don't know how they work, but they're definitely there. You see these people, and you see them where they used to be, what they used to struggle, what they used to be like, and people are like, I don't know how it happened or how it's happening, but here it is. You're someone different. Something's happening to this person. And it's to show that God's working in this person. This is the way God has always worked. He's always used his people, the people that he's working with, the people that he's called to show people, to reveal himself to a world that doesn't yet know him. Why? Because he's not content with just a few people. His love is for all people. It's always about growing. And Paul knows this, and he says something here that is super cool and super interesting. He actually, when he says warped and crooked generation, Paul is actually quoting Moses at the end of the wilderness journey in the wilderness from Deuteronomy 32. Warped and crooked generation is a quote from Deuteronomy 32. For context, Israel was, we're going to get into the weeds for a second, all right? Stick with me, walk with me. I'll try to be as clear. I don't know how that's going to go, but stick with me. But this is super cool. This is super cool. Israel was in the wilderness. God had just given Moses the law. That is our first few books of the Bible. And God's law was actually like the way God was calling the Israelites to like live as they were in the world. Especially after they've been freed from Egypt, freed from slavery in Egypt, and now they've been in the wilderness, and a whole generation has died, and now as over time, and now there's a new generation that are about to go into a new land. So this generation has never seen what life really is in the real world, because they've only been in the wilderness. They've been kind of living in a bubble. And this law was something that God gave them to show them the way to live. And the law, so before God moved Israel out of the wilderness and into a new land, Moses read the law. That's God's way for them to live to all of Israel, so they knew who they were and how to live in light of it. Just kind of like what we were talking about. We are children of God, and we're called to live in a way because of it. Because Israel was going into a world that they had never experienced before. They didn't know what it was going to be like. So Moses read the law publicly, and the Bible tells us that after hearing it, Israel committed themselves to following God through the law God had given them. And there's a lot in the law for us to read. But if you read it, you'll see commands that don't make a ton of sense for us today. But that's because God was writing it to the Israelites while they were in the wilderness, way back then. But if it still shows us who God is today. And its laws still set the standard and principles morally of what's right and wrong for us today. If you read the law in its context, you will see something purely good. You would go, if you took it and put it in our context, if we could actually do this, this is purely good. This is ideal. So the Israelites, after dedicating their lives to God in the wilderness, were about to enter a new land, a land that didn't have the law, that didn't have something purely good in it, and a land occupied by people who didn't know that something purely good really existed. Like we all know, experienced the warped and crookedness of the world, so did they. Take notice here, God's doing something here. With the Israelites entering into a new land, God was beginning to make himself known to people who didn't yet know him. By the way Israel was called to live, God was going to show through them to the rest of the world that is warped and crooked, that there is something pure, good, completely good. Today in 2026, there's Christians, there's children of God all over the world. But when Israel first entered this new land, they were the only people who could honestly say, after dedicating themselves to God, that they were God's people, his children. They were the only ones who had the law. They were the only ones who had the law, something impossible to follow, but good in the purest sense of the word. So what is God doing? God is stepping in. God is working out his plan by stepping into a warped and crooked generation with the mission to show everyone that they come to meet exactly who he was, and to show them that in the warped and crooked world, there is something that is completely and purely good. How? Through his children, which at that time were only the Israelites and the people who lived for God by following his law. That is the way God designed them to live. Now, were the Israelites perfect as they followed the law? Not at all. Did God's law turn into something that people manipulated and used for their own advantage? It did. But the law itself, on its own, is still good. And people could look at it and go, yeah, ideally that's the way to live, but it's impossible. And that's true. How God was calling people to live through the law was an impossible task, but God making himself known to the world with his law and through his people was just part of an even bigger plan he was still working out. Years later, the Bible tells us that God came into the world as a baby, and later in this baby's life, he said on a mountain, I didn't come into this world to get rid of the law. I came to fulfill it. I came to live into it, to follow it, and to be it. And suddenly, people began to realize that the thing that seemed purely good in this world, the law, wasn't actually an idea or a list of rules to live by. It was actually a person. Jesus is the embodiment of the law. He is everything good, everything that's blameless, everything in how we should live. Jesus was the embodiment of that. And the message of the gospel that the Philippians heard through Paul was that this person, Jesus Christ, who was literally blameless and pure in a warped and crooked generation, was put to death on a cross for the sins of the world, so that the crooked and broken generation could look at him and see, the only thing that's good, we killed him. And he was there for us. And his resurrection shows us that, you know how like every good thing eventually turns? The cross is, you look at it and it's like, here's this good person, and we killed him. You know, the resurrection shows us the warpedness and crookedness didn't win. Sin didn't win. Jesus rose. Jesus is alive. There still is someone who is purely good and completely blameless in this world. And he's living today. And he invites us to follow him. Isn't this amazing? Isn't it cool what God is doing? Like, that's just in Exodus. There's a whole other book before that to show what God's been doing. He's always been working on his plan. And as we're going through life, sometimes we can forget that God's at work. God's always been at work. It's taken time. But look at how many people he's revealed himself to over the years. All over the world, people know who Jesus is. God has revealed himself to all of the world because he wants all of the world to know that there is something good, and then they can have it. They can know it. They can walk with it. They can follow with him. And what's just amazing about our passage is so Paul's challenging them. He reminds them that they're children of God, and he's challenging them to live like him. But he's also showing them that you are who God's using to reveal himself to the world. And I love that. Molly gave us a testimony this morning of a time where she struggled with anxiety, a time where she struggled with some things that she's going through in life. And then she said, but then I met Jesus. Then I saw how Jesus fixed this and worked this out, and how he's continuing to do it. He says, it's still hard, but he's doing it. And we were all able to benefit from just hearing like, wow, like Jesus is actually transforming Molly's life. I used to be a huge arguer and complainer in middle school. My parents pulled me out of baseball when I was 13 years old because every night I come home angry at the world for everything that didn't go my way. I'm not like that anymore. I complain, I argue, but I'm not like I was when I was 13. I have a little more maturity than that. And you guys go, well, Carter, you just grew up. But I've sat at high school football games before, in the parents section. You know, we don't always grow up. I kid. God is transforming us. And you know, you guys don't know me super well, but there are people who do know me, and there are people who've seen me at my worst, see me just act in crazy ways, and they're looking at me today and they go, wow, I don't know what's happened to you, but you're not like you were when you were 13. You're not like you were when you started college. You're not like you were 2 years ago when you started this job. And I got a lot of work to do. But let me tell you, God is doing something in me. And it's not me, it's God. And I hope and I pray that my neighbors, that my people, that my wife, that like my students, you guys see that like God's working in me just as much as I see God working in you. Let's end because we got to go. So this week, how do we faithfully respond to this message? Remember first that you are a child of God. Nothing changes that. If your faith is in Jesus Christ, you are a child of God. You are the son of the King, a daughter of the King. We hear the challenge and encouragement to keep going. Take that encouragement. Don't beat yourself up when you fail. Take the encouragement and go, okay, God, I'm going to pick this right up and I'm going to keep going. I want to follow you. And rest in knowing that God's at work in this world. You might not always see it, but take a look at yourself. See how God has changed you. See how he's moved you. Take a look at your kids. Take a look at people that have changed completely. God's doing something in this world, and he's going to continue doing it every single day until he gets back. And that gives us hope for today. And if there's someone here who doesn't know Jesus, if you don't have that relationship with them, Jesus is someone who's revealing himself to you right now. And he says, come to me, all you who are tired and burdened down by life, and I'll give you rest. For those who have faith to respond to this call, let's stand together and take communion. I'll invite you to stand. We're just